come up. Sometimes these thoughts are very mundane, everyday kind of thoughts. Oh, I got to go mow the lawn. Oh, I got to go put gas in the car. Oh, I got to get up early tomorrow morning. All these different things about our everyday mundane life that arise in our minds during our meditation. So those kinds of things should be very easy for us to be able to just marginalize, to just put aside and say, I don't have to worry about that. I'm not thinking about that. I can stop that thought very, very quickly and very easily. Sometimes we have to take notes. Sometimes, there is something important that we remember. I got to call my mother or something like that. So it's always good to have a piece of paper and a pencil nearby so you can write something down, and it's important for you to remember, and you can look at it later so you don't have to be thinking about it over and over again. So that makes very practical sense to do that. But then sometimes thoughts come up that are very, very important. They have to do with our meditation process itself. Sometimes it's our emotions come up. Sometimes it's a point on Dharma. It's a very important academic point that we need to be able to examine. We need to be able to understand. And this is the time in Vipassana meditation, the insight meditation. This is the time when we allow that to happen. Everything at this point has been about relaxation, has been about finding loving kindness, finding bodhicitta, finding peacefulness, and so on. But now here comes something of investigation, something that we need to recognize, something that we need to use our intellect to be able to comprehend. So a fundamental question that we have to answer is, what is awareness? We have been taught that the Buddha, the literal translation for the Buddha, is the awakened one. So awakened from what? Well, awakened from not being aware. So the metaphor here is that we're sleeping, that we're like in a daze, we're like in a dream, we're not paying attention, we don't realize what is happening. We're really not aware of what is actually going on. So to be enlightened, to be a Buddha, is to be aware, to be awakened, to understand all the different things that are happening around us. So what that means is, to be aware means that there are many things that we have learned. There's many things that we know. And all those things are valid. They all have a place in our being a human being. But there's also a lot of things that we don't know. There's things that we can't know as human beings. There are things that we don't know because we either haven't been exposed to them, we don't have an interest in them, or maybe we're just not intelligent enough to be able to comprehend them. And that's all okay. It would be wonderful to be an astrophysicist for me, or to be a surgeon or something like that. But I know I don't have the talent for that. I don't have the skills for that. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm okay with that. And that brings me a certain wisdom that, okay, I don't have all the tools, all the intellectual tools I need to be able to fathom all those different intricacies of astrophysics or of being a brain surgeon, something like that. So being aware is recognizing those things, recognizing the things that you can do, recognizing the things that you can't do, recognizing the things that you can change, recognizing the things that you can't change. All this goes under, the umbrella of awareness. The Buddha realizes all these things. When we are in our Buddha mind, which we all have, we all are Buddha, we all have that within ourselves. We just don't recognize it. But when we do recognize it, when we have those moments of clarity of recognizing our Buddha nature, we see all these things and we accept all these things, either as knowledge or as things that we need to understand a little bit more. And we have compassion for ourselves if there's problems with that. We have wisdom to be able to develop these things, but it's all together. This is all part of awareness. What we develop out of this is a certain blissfulness. This is, the one of the characteristics of having this awareness, that there is this blissfulness that we have. This blissfulness is that peacefulness, that restfulness, that clarity in our lives, in our mind, in our body. There's no stress. We're very comfortable in the embodiment of this. We're very blissful, very happy, very satisfied. And there's a certain strength that comes from this awareness. There's no anxiety. There's no feeling of inability to do things. There's more the feeling of strength that I can, if I want to do it, there's a way that I can do it. And I just have to commit myself. I have to apply myself to be able to do these things. So there's this bliss and there's this strength. And this is in our heart center. And the closer we become stable with our Buddha body, with our being the Buddha, and we talk about the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. And the closer we get to that, the more blissful we become and the more strong we become. We're not able to, or we're not prone to being able to be blown off course. We're able to stay in a stable direction. We're moving forward. We're comfortable where we are. We're not losing ourselves. And out of this then comes the word equipoise, that we have this poise, this equipoise, this balanced poise of being able to remain in this awareness, whether we're sitting here on the cushion, or whether we're out doing work, or we're with our families. This equipoise is always with us. And it's something that we've had to work for. It's not something that comes very easily to us. We've had to develop this equipoise. So it comes through this meditation. It comes through these practices that we've been talking about. So this heart center has this equipoise that is comprised of this bliss and this strength and this balance. So we do this fundamentally. We think of the 3 mind trainings that we have been going through. So we talked about this before in weeks past. We talked about it in learning Buddhism. And we talked about it again when we were talking about meditation skills. So these are the 3 mind trainings. So the first mind training that we go through is one of discipline. Is being able to organize our lives, being able to organize our meditation room, our place, being able to organize our studies and so on, our thoughts, being able to bring them all together and so on, having a moral ethics, being able to do this. That keeps us in this discipline. That we're not, mind is going here, there, and everywhere. We're not going after non-virtue in any way. We're very stable in our virtue. So we talk about the 6 perfections, or the 6 paramitas. So the first 4 were the 4 of discipline. So it was generosity, it was moral ethics, it was patience, and it was perseverance. So those are the first, that's all part of the discipline of the first mind training. Then the next one was to have a mental concentration, a meditative concentration a meditative equipoise. We develop this ability to be able to go through these processes where we can sit and we're not thrown off by our emotions, where we're not being confused by interruptions and so on. That we have this equipoise. We know how to create that for ourselves. We know how to sustain that for ourselves, to be able to allow ourselves to comprehend, to understand the role of meditation in our practice, to develop that practice. So this is the second of the 3 mind trainings, is developing meditative concentration, meditative equipoise, to be able to do that. So then the third one is special insight. And the special insight in terms of the paramitas, in terms of the perfection, is wisdom awareness. Being able to understand how wisdom works. Wisdom is accumulated knowledge. And wisdom is being able to allow new knowledge to come up, to become aware of that. Sometimes the only way we get wisdom is by going to a teaching. Sometimes the only way we get wisdom is by opening up a book. Sometimes we can get wisdom by being very quiet. And then we have this innate wisdom within ourselves that comes up through our meditation. When we are in calm, abiding meditation, we're opening the door to our heart. And our heart is our big mind. And in that big mind, there are heart thoughts. And those heart thoughts reveal themselves through our meditation. So part of the wisdom awareness is experiencing that and welcoming that and being able to abide within that. This is the special insight. When we have these experiences that can't be learned from a teacher, that can't be learned, that can't be read in a book, they have to be experienced. And we get these things, it can be quick like that. When we get these insights, it just comes. And then it may be at the time when it happens, sometimes it'll be an exaltation. It'll be wonderful. It'll be, wow, this is so great. This is what I've been waiting for. Sometimes it'll be very bewildering because it may have an inner meaning that we don't recognize yet. Or maybe we've been exposed to it, but we haven't really put the exposure, the teaching that we got from our teacher together with the experience. So we have to give ourselves the time, we have to give ourselves the ability, the commitment to be able to allow this newfound insight, wisdom, to really be able to manifest in our intellect and then in our body, in our whole body, in our big mind, so that we become the embodiment of that wisdom. It's not just an intellectual, cerebral event that happens. It becomes a whole body experience, a whole life experience, a holistic experience. So this is where we are. This is in Vipassana. This is what we need to learn tonight, what we're going to be talking about. So the word Vipassana is a Sanskrit word, and it means seeing beyond what we thought was real, being able to see beyond what we have already comprehended and recognizing that there's something else beyond that. So Vipassana is that. In Buddhism, it's taught that we need to learn from realized masters. And this points to the importance of seeking teachings. So we need to have the relationship with teachers. We need to have relationship with the scriptures. It's very important to do that. It would require one to be a bodhisattva already to not have to have that. But that only means that in prior lifetimes, they had those experiences. Now in this lifetime, maybe they're ripe, ready for, just that moment of enlightenment, that moment of liberation, that moment of being able to cut themselves off from the emotions. So that's very few people, very, very few people. Buddha Shakyamuni was one like that. Siddhartha Gautama was one like that. He only needed very simple teachings to be able to reach the point that he was able to liberate himself, to find enlightenment. And then he designed the Dharma teachings for our benefit. And this was his genius. This was his great gift to all beings. And we have similar gifts within ourselves. We can at least recognize that same Buddha nature. We may not have the genius that Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha Shakyamuni had, but we recognize that it is within ourselves. So through the teachers and their teachings, that this is the way that we learn through in Buddhism. And through this, listening to many teachings and reflecting on their meaning, that we derive the pure view that we'll be integrating into our meditation. So as we do this, we go through these steps, you see, and it's very important to have a context in which all this fits into place. All these like pieces, these puzzle pieces need to fit together. So we need the confidence to be able to do that. And that comes from being able to have context, of being able to understand how all these pieces have fit together already and how they need to fit together now as we move forward. And through the lack of insufficient knowledge of the teachings that presents an impediment to Vipassana, literally seeing beyond. So what this means is that if we don't have the right basis, if we don't have the right teachings, if we don't go through all these stages that we've been talking about so far, I talked about the four thoughts, I talked about loving kindness, I talked about compassion. If we don't have those building blocks, then we can't get to the level of seeing beyond. At least we may have a glimpse, something might happen, but we don't recognize it as being something really profound. We don't look at it as being liberation. We don't look at it as being enlightenment. We might look at it, oh, I really have a great feeling, I really feel nice. But as fast as it came, as much of a glimpse as it came like that, it goes like that too. It's not stable. It just disappears. With Vipassana, we know how we got there. We know how to stabilize it. And we know that if it does fade, we know how to get back there over and over and over again until it does become very, very, very stable in our lives. So that, like I said a few minutes ago, that we take it with us when we get up off the cushion and we go about our everyday lives. We now are living our lives as an enlightened being. And that's what's difficult, is using this enlightenment, using these glimpses to be able to change our lives, to be able to be more liberated, to be more happy. So this is all part of seeing beyond. So this means looking deeply into the suchness of our nature. So what is our nature? So we talk about human nature. We talk about Buddha nature. So human nature certainly is about our physical body, and it's certainly about our intellectual mind, and most all beings stay right within there, and that's their human nature. Everything is all confused. We think we have wisdom. We think we understand what's going on, but we reach certain parts that we can't get beyond. We can't break through, either because we don't have the intelligence for it, or we just don't have the aptitude for it. We don't have the desire to want to do that, the aspiration to do that. So it's like our humanness, our human nature keeps us down. It keeps pulling us back. When we looked at the 6 realms of being a human being, if you remember, we looked at the wheel of existence that had the 6 realms. And then that globe, that circle, that sphere was in the clutches of Mara, this demon, which is ourselves, that is holding us to be a human being. This is in the grasp of the demon, of keeping us in our human nature. However, we have this Buddha nature, which is transcendent of our human nature. So when we achieve the Buddha nature, when we have glimpses of the Buddha nature, we are transcending that human nature. And then we see the human nature as just an impediment to getting to the Buddha nature. Then we bring the Buddha nature back, and now we become a complete human being. Because we're not just a physical being, we're not just an intellectual being, but we're also a spiritual being. And this is our goal. This is what we're trying to do. So we have to look into the suchness of nature. This is the way it is. This is the suchness of it. This is it. Being a human being is such like this. So this suchness of nature, it's like that. Buddha nature has its suchness. Oh, there's a suchness there. Oh, now when I can bring that together, now that suchness now becomes even richer, and it becomes a thatness. Now I become thatness. So these might seem comical, these words, the way we use them, but they're very expressive. And as we get simpler, as we get more transcendent, these little words mean more and more and more, because all the details of all this suchness just begin to fall away. It's just all part of the confusion. It's just all part of the arrogance of the human mind to be able to think, oh, I got to keep busy. I got to keep doing all these things. When what they need to do is just quiet, go into shamatha, quiet, calm, abiding meditation, and then all this other wisdom comes up. All this thatness appears. So this is the Vipassana that we want to embark on. So Vipassana has 2 aspects to it. There is the analytical aspect, or the discursive meditation. This is the investigation. So we're analyzing, we're looking into, we're trying to understand through our intellectual mind. Discursive meditation means taking a particular topic, and the topic has many different variables to it, and going through all those different variables. And instead of trying to get right to the essence of what that thought is, or what that wisdom is, trying to go right to it. Discursive thought is just going around. And sometimes we do that. We do that with our meditation all the time. Instead of trying to get to the heart of the meditation, to the essence of the meditation, we start thinking about all these other things about it. And we begin to follow that. We begin to follow those thoughts. You've heard that expression, don't follow your thoughts, because it just takes you, well, what is this? What is this? What does this mean? How is this working? And so on like that. Is this meditation? Instead of just trying to keep one-pointed mindfulness on the essence of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So this is discursive meditation. It's not useful in the beginning. It's not useful definitely in the end, it is part of a process, but we have to recognize that we can turn that process off and just continue to focus on the essence. This is what we need to do. So the next part of Vipassana, the second aspect, is non-conceptual meditation. Non-conceptual, or resting the mind. So non-conceptual implies that there's conceptual. So conceptual is the analytical part, thinking about all those concepts, being discursive, looking at all those different concepts. Being non-conceptual is now resting the mind, is getting into that essence. So we have to train ourselves to be able to do that. One-pointed mindfulness. Everything has been building up to this one-pointed mindfulness. So in aspect number one of the analytical discursive meditation, we look at meditating on selflessness of the person and on meditating on selflessness of phenomena. Now, if you're hearing this for the first time, I know it's going to be bewildering, unless maybe you're a Buddha. But for most of us, we've had to go through this. We have been talking about this to some degree, either with Khenpo Samdup in the teachings that we've had in the past, or we've talked about it in our studies and so on. But now we're looking at it in terms of Vipassana. So selflessness. We talk about this all the time. Selflessness. We talk about the self and that there is this selflessness. We talked about it when we were considering emptiness, that there is no true self. The self is an imaginary, temporary figment of our mind that we use to try and justify our existence, that we are here and it seems like we are here forever. We're never going to die. The younger we are, the more remote the idea that we're going to die becomes. But the older we get, the more real it becomes, because we begin to see other people who are dying around us and so on. We say, that really is going to happen to me at some point. We begin to accept that as a reality. But still, we're holding on. We say, oh, my soul will live on forever. My soul is the self. That will not die. That is eternalistic. That will live forever. But when we study emptiness, we come to recognize that everything is compounded. Everything is all these things that come together. Physical things. All this body is what? Is tissues, skin, bone, organs, all this stuff. And then there's all these tissues. And then behind all the tissues or below the tissues are all these molecules. And then all these molecules are made up of all these atoms. And these atoms are made up of all these subatomic atom parts. And then there's all this energy that is spinning around all these subatomic particles are spinning around, and all this energy and so on. So there's all this compounded nature of all this stuff, and that none of it is innate. None of it exists as its own. It is all composites of other things. It's all made up of other things. So realizing this is realizing what we call emptiness. That everything is empty of its own nature. So we talk about that as phenomenal nature. So phenomenal nature is like what's external to us. Our self nature is what is internal to us, that we seem to exist in this phenomenal nature, but this phenomenal nature is just as empty as that which is within ourselves. That all the things that seem to be permanent to us are all made up of the same things that we're made up of. It gets right down to atoms and subatomic atoms, and maybe things that we haven't recognized yet, that the scientists haven't found yet, but they continually look for, and so on. And so we see that that's how we get to our equanimity. When we talked about the four thoughts, when we talked about the four immeasurable thoughts, we talked about equanimity, that all things are the same, not just human beings, but all things within the self and all things within phenomena. That which we call the self, that's what we call phenomena. So it's the selflessness of the self and the selflessness of phenomena, that it is all compounded, just like we are compounded. To be able to really understand this, we have to analyze this. We have to investigate this. Hearing me say this right now probably doesn't satisfy you. There's all kinds of doubts going in your mind. There's all kinds of confusion. What is he talking about? I need to sit and I need to really figure this out for myself. I need to investigate this for myself. So we get our notes, we get our books, we get all this stuff, and part of our Vipassana meditation becomes that investigation, where we get our papers out, we begin to study, we begin to contemplate, we begin to think about that. Our eyes are open, we're looking, we're feeling, we're doing all the things with the five senses. That's part of investigation. It all doesn't happen, with our eyes closed and sitting here looking like a Buddha. It doesn't all happen exactly like that. But once we have investigated, and once we have exhausted all the possibilities of what that self is, the self of phenomena, or the self of our own self, of our body, speech, and mind, once we've exhausted all of that, there's nothing left for us but to relax. And this is where insight comes. More insight, deeper insight comes. More realization of what it is to be transcendent. That we have transcended all this knowledge, all this stuff that has been conjured up in our mind. So we're going to talk about the mind a little bit more as we move on here. So the person is just the continuum of our aggregates, our skandhas, including our mind, or rather the sense of a thinker, the person who is feeling and emoting this movement of mind, what this mind is. So we talked about this as the five skandhas, the five heaps, the five aggregates. And here, it says that it's our form, our body, it's the feeling, it's the sensations that we have, it's the perceptions that we begin to develop, it's the mental formations of being able to recognize things and name things, and the consciousness, the awareness of being able to put all this together and be able to form, our brain thoughts and so on, to be able to form our lives, put our lives together. So this is a very, introduction to this. You may have heard this before, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail about this right now. But to be aware of these five skandhas, of these building blocks of what the self is, of what the mind is, of what the person is, what we think it is, this is all stuff for meditation. This is all stuff for investigation. So what happens is we begin to, as a normal human being who hasn't had the benefit of Dharma teachings, who hasn't had the benefit of meditative instruction and practice, we begin to fixate and we begin to cling onto all these little individual pieces as being who we are, and of being a great meditator, being a great practitioner, being a great human being, being a great father or a great mother, or being a great whatever our profession is, whatever job we have, and so on. We begin to make these associations and they become our identity. It becomes the subjective mind. We subject ourselves to this being, to this real being. We think that we're real, and we hold on to that. We cling on to that, and we grasp at that. When we go through the changes in our lives and so on, we're grasping at, who am I? Who am I now? With all this change, what's happening? Who am I? Am I still the same person? So as we develop this, we develop our emotions. You know, we're getting attached to ourselves, and we develop these 84,000 emotions that we've learned before that are based on the 5 poisons of ignorance, of hatred, of desire, of jealousy, and of greed. So those emotions come out because we're holding on to these things. And then these emotions, these poisons, cause us to do these actions based on these emotional responses that we're having to all this stuff that we don't have a good understanding, we're not liberated from. And then we develop karma, you know, these actions and the results of the karma. And so now we're caught in this cycle of doing things over and over and over again in the same way to get the same result, because we're grasping at this life. We think that this life this is where it's at. This is the best. It doesn't get any better than this. You know, how many planets are there? How many solar systems are there? How many suns are there? This is the best. This is the best. Being a human being is the best. I'm convinced of that. This is what we tell ourselves. This is what the scientists tell ourselves. This is what the politicians tell us all about ourselves. This is what we want to think about ourselves. We don't want to let that go. So from this karma, from this play of doing these things over and over again based on these emotions, comes our suffering. This is why we suffer, because we're grasping. We're clinging. We want this body. We want this life. We want all this stuff. So we're suffering. And therefore, the root of all suffering and all negativity is the self, or the subjective mind. So this is what we become. And this suffering, we begin to accept. Oh, this is life. You know, I'm amazed at people that want to have children. You know, I've got a child, you know, and I love my daughter, you know, and I know you love your children and so on. But I wonder, for myself, there was a time, do I want to bring another being into this world? You know, it's craziness. Why would we want to do this? You know, maybe they're knocking at the door, you know, to tell us, oh, I want to be born. I want to be born. I want you to be my parent. I want you to be my parent. Maybe there's something there. I wouldn't deny that that's true. But in any case, there's a heavy responsibility in bringing someone into this world. So in other words, it comes down to an erroneous mental state. The self is what we call the body, or the constitutional elements, and the sense fields. So all this that we call our self, all that we call our body, all that we call our life is this how does it say? This constitutional elements. It's all built up of all these things. That's why I said it was like a holon. You know, it's all together. Everything is touching everything else. You can't separate one and without disturbing the whole. But the person is not the essence of the aggregates and the like. This is because the aggregates and the constitutional elements are impermanent and are a combination of many parts. The person is seen as permanent and as a singular entity, a concept which we impute onto something else. So we are always trying to find our identity. We're imputing all this stuff as being me, as being you, you're doing it for yourself and so on. And this is innately how we separate ourselves from others. I am unique. I am separate from them. And because of that, I'm better than they are, or they're better than I am. They're better than I am, and I have a false sense of a poor quality of life, that I'm not as good as they are. So we can have an attachment to ourselves, but we can also have an aversion to ourselves. We don't like ourselves, and we can identify with that. This is where our neuroses comes from. Oh, I'm not good enough. And you develop all these neurotic tendencies, all these things that go on and so on, but you identify with that. You say, oh, I don't go up ladders. I'm afraid of heights. Or I don't go into crowds. I don't like crowds. And that becomes your identity. I just stay home by myself, or I just have 2 or 3 friends and I don't want any more friends. Or on the other hand, you like yourself so much, you want to share yourself with everybody. You want to be part of a group, and you're always looking for a group to be part of, and so on, because you've always been able to be the center of a group, or at least part of the group. So this is ways in which we cling, or we cling to our identity. So this person cannot really be said to exist as to what we think it is, or to be of anything else. And this is because the person is not any other thing or entity. The unquestioned assumption of me and mine is nothing but a delusion. We should investigate in this way. We talked about the 5 poisons. I mentioned them. And the first, most basic of the poisons is ignorance. Another way of expressing ignorance is saying delusional, that we think we know everything when we're ignorant of all those things that we don't know, but we are delusional, thinking that we don't need those things, or they don't exist. So we become delusional. We become delusional in our own little world. And it's fostered, it's developed by all this stuff around us, by as I said before, by the scientists, by the politicians, by all these, our society and so on, is delusionally telling us that we have a real place, that there is a identity here that we need to be part of, whether we're Americans, or we're a particular race, or we're a particular sex, or all these different things that we can identify with are all delusional, because they're all temporary. It's all selflessness of the self, the selflessness of phenomena. It really doesn't exist. It's all empty of its own nature. This is how we liberate ourselves, by realizing this as being a reality. This reality that we think is only one side of reality. This reality has 2 sides to it. So it's through this investigation, it's through this Vipassana, to bring it back, it's through this Vipassana that we really investigate this. It's not just something we read in a book. It's not something that our teacher told us and we maybe made a note about. It is actual investigation. It's getting down into it yourself, having the experience of emptiness. having the experience of selflessness. In the same way, we should try to understand concepts and emotions which are expressions of the inner subject of mind. Look directly into the concept. Try to see if it has a form or a shape. Deeply and carefully look to see where emotion came from, where it is located, and where does it go. So we've talked about these things in other classes. We've talked about these things before. But now we're getting to a razor sharp edge to what this is. We're cutting through all this duality, all this stuff that we're still holding on to, all this stuff that we don't understand, is not clear yet. You know, we're still working at this. And we're going to continue working at this through the rest of our lives and lives to come, because it's very, very, very subtle. And our attachments, our delusions are very, very, very strong. And we have to purify, purify, purify to be able to get to these points where these razors begin to cut through these things. But this is where we start. Understanding this Vipassana meditation, this is where it starts. And any work that we do is not lost. It's still there. You can always recover it, you know, and whether you recover it tomorrow or you recover it next week or you recover it in another lifetime, it's there. Once you create these seeds, you can recover them. That's what we're doing now. We're recovering seeds of things that were left behind before. You know, I always say to people, where were you before you were born? Where do you go when you die? It's both the same place. It's reality. We see reality as this, but this is just the appearances. But when we leave our physical body, when we leave our intellect, now all that's left is pure spirit. There's reality. So we've been there many times. It's a matter of being able to recognize that and become the embodiment of that reality, what that reality is. So through this investigation here, it's if you don't have this paper, you should get it. And I've emailed it to you, and Tony, I'll send it to you if you don't have it. But here, it's telling us, look directly at the concept. Try to see if it has a form or a shape. Look deeply and carefully to see what emotion it comes from. Where is it located and where does it go? It's through this method of investigation that we're cutting through. This is the razor edge. This is how we do it. It's not something that just happens immediately. It's something we got to work for. Meditation is not a passive thing. Some people will tell you that. Some people will say, oh, you just want to rest, you just want to relax, you just want to reduce your stress, you just go, Om Mani Padme Hum, or whatever your mantra is. And yes, it does have that initial effect of relaxing you and your blood pressure goes down, and that's a positive quality. Those are all good things. But it's not cutting through to the essence. It's not cutting through to be liberational, to be purifying. This is how we do it here. It's very active. Very active. It takes time. It takes commitment. So now the present awareness you have in mind, and suddenly out of this mind, a thought or emotion arises, and you try to see the following. Would it come from mind? Did it come from outside the mind? Is it one with mind, or is it separate from the mind? So this is when you're in that meditation. This is when you're in that calm abiding meditation. And these thoughts begin to come up, these wisdom thoughts, and you begin to think, oh, wow, what is it? Is this my mind talking to me? What is my mind? Let me understand my mind. What is that? So understanding the mind now becomes the focal point of what we got to get to. We're beyond the ideas of other concepts like the emotions and so on. Now we're into the mind itself. If you conclude thoughts or emotions are to mind as sunbeams are to the sun, it's a fallacy, because the sun and its rays shine simultaneously. So here's the example. Khenpo always uses this example. He says, there's the sun, and then there's the rays of the sun. Are they separate from each other, or are they the same thing? Would the rays be there if the sun was not burning? If the sun is burning, does it inherently send out the rays? Both things happen simultaneously. If they're separate from each other, then that's a fallacy. If you think that they're separate from each other, you can have, here's sunshine rays and here's the sun over here. I don't have the sun, but I got the rays. Well, you know that can't happen. I have the sun here and it's burning, but there's no heat, there's no light from it. You can't have that. The two are part of the same. It's like wisdom and compassion. The two are two sides of the same hand. You can't have wisdom without compassion. You can't have compassion without wisdom. Another way of thinking of compassion is to say skillful means, or to say method, or to say actualization of the wisdom. There's wisdom, then there's actualization. The actualization is the compassion. And we do it through skillful means. We do it through a method. So the same thing is true with the sun and its rays. So this is looking into the mind. If you conclude mind and thoughts, mind and emotions are one, how are they one? So now we're thinking of the mind and the thoughts of the mind and the emotions. Is it that mind appears as thought? Or how is it they are one? Or is it that thoughts are merged with mind? If you conclude that mind and thoughts are not one, try to investigate that. Try to examine how they are different and so forth. So this is looking into the mind. So if you have the mind, let's say the mind is like the sun, and you have thoughts which are like the rays of the sun. Are they separate from each other? Or are they different aspects of the same thing? And is that not compounded nature? The sun is a physical object. The rays are physical objects. You know, they're collections of photons that are all coming together. They're very highly compacted. You know, we might look at it and say, oh, it's light, but they're photons. You know, and all this is, so the mind thinks. The brain thinks. This is what it does. Those thoughts are part of the mind, but the mind is compounded, just like everything else. The mind is a concept. Try to see where forms that appear come from. Do they come from the mind? Should forms follow wherever you go? This is a fallacy. Just because you think it, does it make it so? On the other hand, if forms do not come from the mind, forms should also continue to appear and perceived by your corpse even after you die. So if we've had many lives before, and people like to think that we've had many lives before, why don't we remember all those lives? Because that brain where all those emotions, where all those experiences were stored, it died with the body many lives ago. So we don't have those thoughts. We can experience thoughts through our transpersonal investigation, through our meditation, through our being able to transcend our attachments to ourselves and realize that we're all the same, that everybody has the same thoughts, everybody has the same emotions, everybody has the same suffering. It's through that that we can then experience the transpersonal. And if you want to hang a name on it and say, oh, okay, this was so-and-so when he lived in 1750 in the middle of Europe or something like that, and I have an affinity for that lifestyle and that being and that name, and oh, that must be my past life or something like that. But this is something that we have conjured up. This is another one of our appearances, a mental appearance that we've created for ourselves. Otherwise, when we die, our thoughts would still be around. You know, they'd still be lingering and coming into people's mind. Now you can say, okay, well, if I write a book and here I put down all my thoughts about a given subject and I put it down, in that way my thoughts are living on and so on. Well, that's true for a time until I take that book and I put it in a fire and it burns up. Now what happened to those thoughts? They're gone just like everything else. So we can imprint those thoughts into temporary devices, which are just compounds of more devices and so on. So that's all part of when we talk about the two truths. We talk about the absolute truth, we talk about the relative truth. So it's all relative. As long as that book remains existent, then my thoughts are existent. But as soon as that book is destroyed, my thoughts are gone too. Because I'm gone. I'm dead now. This is all part of liberation. This is all part of Vipassana. This is all part of understanding our Buddha nature. Our Buddha nature does not cling. Our Buddha nature does not grasp. Our Buddha nature has no identity. It is everywhere. Everywhere is just a concept. It's every time. Every time is a concept. It's beyond all these concepts. If I'm thinking it, it's delusional. It's a concept. To be non-conceptual. When you start entering into a conversation with yourself or somebody else, and you start talking about some of these, higher level things, start thinking about it in terms of what's conceptual and what's non-conceptual. The conversation gets very, very simple, very fast. It's not a lot to talk about. All we do is talk about concepts. What we think it is are delusions. So when we begin to examine things, I'm talking about our thoughts now, but what about our senses, the things that come in, that we hear, the things that we smell, the things that we see, the things that we touch, the things that we taste? All these things are part of those building blocks of all this relative nature. And they're gone too. So now don't look at the thoughts, emotions, or any of the appearances of the six sense objects. Don't look at them. Instead, just look directly and nakedly at the very essence of mind itself. Is there a vividness? Is there a presence? Is there emptiness? Is it more of a clarity or more of an emptiness? So start looking at that now. And you see the concepts yet again. The mind just thinking, because that's what it does. Discursive thoughts. Which seems more predominant to you? Or is it an inseparability of clarity and emptiness? What's more predominant? Any one of these particular thoughts more predominant? Or this one here really stands up to time. I can't get rid of this thought. This one must be true. So continue to look, continue to examine. By investigating and examining in this way, the great meditator will eventually reach the point where he or she will not get trapped in the web of doubt and skepticism and will make great strides in his or her practice. This is the reason why we should examine in this way. So we rest. We're going through all this investigation and finally we get exhausted. I can't think anymore. I can't be following all these thoughts. I just have to let all this go. Oh my goodness. How's everybody doing? Anybody have any comments right now? We're not.
You are on fire tonight, Lance.
I was a preacher in a past life.
Man, I am digging it. Oh.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Lance, I do have a question.
Yes.
So as beginners in our meditation, is it what should we do like in order to understand the nature of mind when you have like different experiences in your meditation process? And let's say that they're pleasurable, a lot of them, and you're just gonna want to achieve that state over and over because it just feels good. You feel like you're relaxed. You feel like that's kind of like the state of that you want to be in all the time. How do you distinguish that from like the nature of mind in itself? Or is this like, I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Are this like stages of meditation? You just learn to relax deeper and deeper into it?
Well, this is what we practice. This is exactly what we're talking about. You're having these experiences that you're talking about. You're clinging onto the experiences. You're thinking that they're real and so on, but they're all distractions. It's all discursive thought. It's just stuff that we want to be true when it's all just relative. It's just all, it's all impermanent. It's all empty. It's just the brain doing what it does. It's just creating all these stories and so on. So what we're trying to do is to get beyond that, this is my thought. I'm going to tell you, to me, I can get to a point where the Buddha is a gateway. And beyond the gateway is other dimensions that we can't fathom. Whether that's it's an expression. It's just a way of trying to understand something. The Buddha as being something that we have within ourselves, but to know that there's something beyond what we are.
Gotcha. So the idea is to just keep on practicing, but there's a fine line that I see, that you cannot get attached to all the experiences that the meditation is bringing sometimes. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. That's the demon. That's Mara holding on to the wheel of existence. You know, that's the demon that keeps on coming up, saying, you can know, you can know, you can know. Don't let yourself go. Your ego wants you to have an identity. Don't let yourself go. Be Adrian, be Adrian, be Lance, be Lance. What's wrong with you?
Thank you, Lance.
Lance?
Yes.
What I don't want to say what happens, but once we succeed in our analysis, and we can deconstruct what we think are phenomena, and sort of take the pieces apart and let them float where they need to go, which is nowhere. Is the idea then to actually experience what's left, which is emptiness, and do we get to stay there for more than an instant before our mind has some reaction, and then all of a sudden we're conceptual again?
We become the embodiment of body, speech, and mind of the enlightened ones of the Buddha. And it's inexpressible. There's no words to really explain it. Anything words that we have are conceptual words. And every single one of them misses the point. But yet we try, because we want to have a group, we want to have a sangha, we want to, but to recognize that that's all part of being on the path. When we reach the Buddhahood, we don't need the path anymore.
So when we reach Buddhahood, there's no conceiving anymore.
Correct. It's total awareness. Yeah. From our state, from our point of view. I mean, all we've got is our working basis. But as a Buddha, if you've had a glimpse of that Buddha nature, you come back with that. You come back into your ordinary mind. You come back into your ordinary life. And they say to you, what happened? You say, I can't explain it. All I know is I love everybody and everybody loves me. Let me go. It's what happened to the Buddha. Remember when the Buddha attained enlightenment? For 7 weeks. He paced around and his mind was blown. Maybe you've had a blown mind once or twice. I remember you got to go insane. Everything turns around. Everything that I thought was ordinary now becomes extraordinary. And everything that was extraordinary is now ordinary. And that's why it has to be experienced. There's no way to be able to, you can't plug somebody into it. So it's a question for each one of ourselves to want to answer is, do we want Do we want that? Do we want to be that? Do we want to let this go? And then the next question would be, okay, if you do, then how do you do it? If you don't want to do it, then just keep on keeping on. Get a big screen TV, get a bigger stereo, get a bigger car, get a bigger house, whatever it is. Keep on keeping on. Playing the game. Any other questions or thoughts anybody want to share? Okay, shall we continue on a little bit? I know we're not going to get through this whole thing. We're going to have to go into next week and talk about it. If you want to continue talking about it, to go through this chapter. This is the most difficult chapter of the book. And you can, I think, maybe see why.
We can continue.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about the second aspect of Vipassana. The first aspect was the analytical side. We're looking at the Discursive Meditation investigation. So now the second part, the second aspect, is the selflessness of phenomena to meditate in this way. So now we're going to be looking at so now we're going to talk about that. So the selflessness of phenomena. Phenomena refers to the outer phenomena and to the inner subject, the mind. Outer phenomena and the mind. The inner subject of the mind. So we'll have to define this, what that means. So that being so, it is the grasping and fixation to subject-object duality of inner subject and world out there that is known as the self of phenomena. Everything that falls into the sphere of the self-nature of phenomena is, according to ultimate truth, nothing outside of or a part of the mind. This can be shown when you try to deconstruct any phenomena down to the subtlest atomic level. So now it's getting very, very, very subtle. It's getting very, very rare. And there's no easy way for somebody like me to be able to explain it to anybody because it's so subtle. And, you know, and the physicists, astrophysicists and so on, and they, you know, this is where they spend their time talking about, you know, the dark matter and the dark energy and all these subtle, they're looking at it in terms of physics, physical nature. The philosophers, the meditators, are looking at it in terms of spirit, in terms of spirituality. And being able to see that phenomenal nature is the same as physical nature. So this is the kind of stuff that you got to spend time contemplating. Each time we deconstruct it into parts, when you examine the subtlest level of phenomena to find an inherent essence, you can never find any essential nature. From time without beginning, through forms and such are not truly real. We have grasped onto them as though they were, whereas forms and other phenomena only appear as if in a dream. So here is where that word should be thoughts. Thought forms and such are not truly real. You grasp onto them as though they were. So it's like a dream. You know, think about where you were at 6 o'clock tonight. Just sit here and think about it for a moment. It's like a dream. Totally different than where you are right now. Think about when you woke up last night at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning and you had a dream. It's the same thing. It appears to be the same thing. That dream that you had 1 o'clock in the morning to what you actually were open, or when you were experiencing with your eyes wide open and everything, it's 6 o'clock this evening. What's the essence of that? Is there any reality in any of that? Or is it all just relative to circumstances, to conditions? It's all compounded nature. And just like that dream wasn't real, at 6 o'clock wasn't real. It was all just emptiness, appearances, a play that you were in a couple of hours ago. So this is our mind. This is the mind, the way the mind is working. It's working in this nebulous area here. And talking about that we're all connected. I've used this example a bunch of times, and other people use similar techniques and so on, but I've often said that, that we can imagine that there is this vibration that we are part of, this vibration that's invisible to us. We can't hear this vibration, but yet we are part of this vibration. And this vibration is this continuum that has no beginning, has no end. It's a concept. It's a way of trying to communicate a mind, this continuous mind. But it's a concept. And as long as we hold on to concepts, as long as we hold on to what we think is the mind, then we become enslaved by our own thoughts. We remain in our human nature. We may have glimpses of something beyond, of something transcendent, but we keep bringing it back. And we're binding it up with a ball and chain. Our delusions, our rationalizations. To childlike beings, mind itself is appearing as forms and the like, as if those were outside the mind. To childlike beings, as if these are outside of the mind. In reality, form and the like are not anything other than mind's projections. We're imputing, we're projecting, we're creating this story. Forms and everything else are unreal, and since mind is not separate from this, mind is also unreal. Form and the like appear as many different things, yet they are essentially not one entity, not are they many entities. Since mind is not separate from or outside of forms and the like, mind too, in essence, is not a singular entity, nor is it manifold. So my example of that vibration is a manifold expression, illustration of trying to describe mind to us as we are talking about the fundamentals of Buddhism. Now we're getting into something that's a little bit deeper. So now we have to redefine some things. If we tried to talk about this the first or second or third week of Buddhism 101, y'all would have run out of the room screaming, Lance is crazy. So we go through this. This is being on the path. And this is the path of meditation. Next, we apply this to being a bodhisattva, to being a holy enlightened being, to going on the path of being a purified being on the 10 bhumis, which we've mentioned a couple different times. And the only way to get to that path, the only way to move along that path, once we get on the bhumis, is through meditation. I don't know of another way. Maybe somebody has a secret I haven't heard about, but in Buddhism, they don't teach it. They teach this. They teach meditation. This is the way. This is what the Dharma is. This is what the Buddha experienced. And he said, the only thing I can do is teach you how I got there. I can't teach you what it's like to be there. You have to experience that by yourself. So in this way, when we use wisdom to look deeply into the essential nature of mind, in its ultimate nature, mind cannot be found internally, nor can it be found externally. So we're using wisdom. We're using this wisdom. We're using this loving kindness. We're using all these techniques that we've been learning, all this knowledge, all this stuff, and find that it can't be found internally or externally. Mind cannot be pinpointed anywhere else either. There is also no past mind, no present mind, no future mind that can be pinpointed. Mind is an illusion. It's a concept.
Lance?
Yes, sir.
I know a lot of people that are going to be disappointed when they hear this.
Yeah.
Sorry for the joke.
Yeah. But what is awareness? What does this mean? What is the essence of awareness? Freedom. Remember, we talked about this before. You know, what is the first of the eightfold path? Right view. Freedom is possible. To be free. Think about how encumbered we are. Think about how many balls and chains we have in this life, that we have manifested in this life, that we brought with us, that we created new ones. And now what we're trying to do through the Dharma and the Dharma teachings practice is to be able to cut all those chains, cut all those ties, all those things, so that we can become free. This is what we're learning in the Bardo Todal. The Bardo Todal is liberation in the intermediate states. Liberation, to be liberated from this, where do you go when you die? Where are you before you're born? And we said that it's in reality. This is the other side of reality. This is the actualization of reality. This is the coalescence of all that stuff into form. But if you don't have that coalescence, you have the total freedom of not having the body, of not having the intellect, of just being a Buddha, what we call a Buddha, or being aware. Is there something beyond that? Is that a gateway to something else, to another dimension that we can't conceive of? The invitation is to try it out. In its arisings, mind arising. Mind does not come from anywhere. In its cessation, it doesn't go anywhere. As we increase our consciousness, as we increase our awareness, what happens to the mind? You know, is the mind increasing? If we suppress these things, does the mind go away? You know, it's relative. It's all a matter of appearances. It's all a matter of illusion. How do you want to define those illusions? How do you want to define this play that we're in? When looking for mind, there is nothing to be located, nothing to show, no form to it at all. Just to look directly into the true essence of this mind, this vividly present awareness. So here's some pointers, here's some things. What exactly is it that is there? Is it a body or is it mind? If there is a mind, if mind exists, there must be something there, correct? Right? What is it like? Does it have a form, shape, color, and such? Where in your body does it reside? Is it outside, inside, or in between? Mind's beginning, middle, and end cannot be seen, cannot be identified. Thus, when you are investigating with wisdom and you do not see any real essential nature of all phenomena, do not get caught up in the conceptualization of this not seeing by thinking. Let me say that again. Do not get caught up in this conceptualization of this not seeing by thinking. Of this not seeing by thinking. We think with our brain. So what this is begging the question of, well, how are we seeing? We're seeing with heart minds, heart thoughts, the big mind, not the little mind, heart thoughts. Experiencing it in your heart. Experiencing life in your heart. All the emotions are products, precipitations of the brain. All the emotions are up here. I always said, oh, you know, he's so emotional. He's so, you know, his heart, he's so heartfelt. He's got all these emotions. Well, it's because the emotions from the brain have blocked up the heart. The heart itself is free. This heart mind is the essence of freedom. So is the form permanent or impermanent? Is it empty or not empty? Is it defiled or not defiled? And so forth. To look at all these things. But what are we looking at? We're looking at all the dualities. We talked about our dualistic nature. So what we need to do is we need to learn how to cut through all these dualisms. all this dualistic thought. How do we do that? Just by thinking of these things? No, we need examples. We're human beings. We have limitations. Through the meditational deities, through the meditative yidams, through the examples of the pure Buddhas, through deity yoga, is how we learn how to do that. This is the essence of the Vajrayana, of bringing that wisdom of being a Buddha into ourselves. It doesn't happen in one time. It's a process. We have to go through all these things to get to that process. And then once we get to the process, we got to do the process over and over again until we become the embodiment of being a living Buddha. And we do that a little bit at a time. Some of us quicker than others. But that's the process. Cutting through. So as I've said, in our next one-on-one sessions, when we're finished this cycle of teachings, when we're finished this book, we're going to start doing deity yoga practices. We're going to talk about that and start doing them and requesting empowerments from the lamas. But in the meantime, we can still talk about them. Not the heavy duty ones, but we can talk about the peaceful deities. So to understand this emptiness, to understand this mind, this cutting through, what is impermanent, what is permanent, what is empty, what is not empty, what is defiled, what is not defiled, we come to the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is what? The essence of the Mahayana teachings, the middle way, the teaching of emptiness. In your book, I believe, the Heart Sutra is in here. Yep. Pages 14 and 15, and 16 and 17. So we're not going to go through it tonight, but feel free to read this. And it is a meditation. It is a system. It is a practice. You read this, you recite this out loud. You think about every single word that is in here, every picture that is being cast in your mind through the explanations of every phrase and every sentence and so on. And then you come to the Teyata Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sam Gate Buddhi Soha. That's your mantra. Gone, gone. This is it. Gone, gone, really gone. Not to come back. So be it. That's the meaning of the mantra. Teyata Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sam Gate Buddhi Soha. This is the essence of the Mahayana teachings. And you can't get to the Vajrayana until you understand and have been able to embody the essence of what the Mahayana is, at least to some working degree. You may not be a master at it. You don't need to be a master at it at this point, because it's a whole on. It's all working together. So we need the discipline to start. And we start working on the bodhisattva. We start working on the emptiness. We start working on the two truths. And then we go into the Vajrayana. We start going into the wisdom aspects. And then we find from the wisdom aspects, oh, I need more discipline. Oh, I need more understanding of emptiness. Then I get that and I go back to the Vajrayana. And now that becomes more sensible to me. I understand more about that. But then I reach a point where I need to go back to more discipline, more. And so it's this process that keeps going over and over and over again. This is practice. This is why we do this over and over and over again. You may think it's boring. You may think you're better than the system. Well, God bless you. So, in the Heart Sutra, we avoid conceptualization of feelings or sensations. We avoid conceptualization of perfection. Perception. We avoid conceptualization of mental formations. We avoid conceptualization of consciousness. And like that, we use our wisdom now to deconstruct. What we're doing, we're taking it all apart. We're taking about all the things that we thought were true, we're taking apart and we put it back together again. But we put it together simply. Every meditation is a death. All the concepts, all the ideas, all the expectations that we go into the meditation with should be liberated and aired out. And then when we come back from the dissolution, then we put it back together again in a very simplified form. We do our dedications and we get off the cushion as the deity. So we become reborn. Reborn as the deity. Reborn as the Buddha. Reborn as an enlightened being to some degree. Maybe we had a glimpse. Maybe we had more than a glimpse. Maybe we had a vision. Maybe we had an experience. Maybe we had a realization. Over time, they begin to happen, and then you find there's no time. You find time just goes away. That's one of the hallmarks that you recognize that you are everywhere when you're right here, and you're nowhere now. And there's no time like now. Be here now. There's no other time. There's no past. There's no present. There's no future. Time is a construct. Location is a construct. So whatever the object of investigation, when the yogi or yogini comes to the point in which no essential nature of the object can be apprehended in the ultimate nature, that is the time to enter into the non-conceptual samadhi. Now, I'm going to read that again. Whatever the object of the investigation, whatever your Vipassana is focused on, whatever you're thinking about, when the yogi or the yogini comes to the point where there's no essential nature of the object can be apprehended in the ultimate nature. In other words, you've blown away whatever that object was, whatever that focal point of the Vipassana was, whatever that wisdom that you were searching for. When that's been blown away, now is the time to enter into the non-conceptual samadhi. Now you rest. You just enjoy it. You go through levels of that. We'll talk about another time. That's how we get to samadhi. You could plug in. You could go stick your finger in the electric receptacle in your wall, and you'll have a mind-blowing experience. But it's not the same thing. This is one that you manifested for yourself. You are in control of this. You are in control when it begins to fade, and you can get back into it. You're in control and being able to bring it on again tomorrow. You're in control of maintaining the stability of it until tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day after that. After you've used your wisdom and intellect to look deeply into the true essential nature of any object of focus, such as form and so forth, then you enter into meditative stability. What is meant here by meditative stability is not abiding in form or anything. This is, you've heard of the illusory body? Meditative stability is not abiding, yes.
Sorry, are you saying that meditative stability is the same as illusory body? Or
Yes. Yes. Now, if you're using illusory body as the body that we, that when we leave our physical body, when we go into the bardo, through the literal bardo of death, that's one way of explaining or using the imagery of the illusory body. But every meditation is a rehearsal for that death. Every meditation is a rehearsal for the illusory body. So it's not dependent upon your death of the physical body. What do you think?
okay.
What do you think of that?
I never put those two concepts together, but now when you said that, it makes complete sense. It really does, because, like you said, every meditation is the goal to prepare for that moment. And when you're passing, of course, you know, it's the illusory, you realize the illusory body, and then obviously those two, they must be the same. So it makes complete sense.
Correct.
And you're referring to the yidam when you say illusory body.
No.
No?
No. The yidam is your teacher, your instructor, your exemplar to help you to get there. Your illusory body is what you are liberating.
Buddha nature?
Yes.
Okay.
To not be encapsulated by the body anymore, to be not encapsulated by concept, not be locked up in any way, to be set free.
And that is beyond the yidam or the deity?
The yidam and the deity are exemplars of that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much.
Mm-hmm. That's the genius of this system, that we have exemplars, that we have these teachers. You know, this is the Sambhogakaya. You know, there's the Dharmakaya that is not totally non-conceptual. The Sambhogakaya has forms. It's desireless, but it has forms. And these forms are meditational forms that have been constructed for our benefit so we can understand. They have anthropomorphic forms so that we can relate to that, because our puny minds need that crutch. They need that help to do that. But we have to get beyond that. And what's beyond that is the illusory body. When we let that go.
Is that Mahamudra?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the obscuration of wisdom, of omniscience. When we can let that go is the liberation of the obscuration of omniscience.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're running late. I'm just going to finish a couple more sentences and then we're going to finish for tonight. So if you can hold up for another minute. So meditative stability is not abiding in this world or anywhere in this world and the next. Is not abiding in this world or anywhere in between this world and the next. So it's giving it all up. Letting all the concept go. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. Since there is no point of reference that can be identified as form or anything else, this is the meditative stability beyond reference point. So there's no net, there's no tightrope, there's no sky, there's no concept. All right, so that's where we're going to leave it tonight. Next week, we're going to make some other points about this. We're going to bring this back because this is a very big subject, like I said. There's no bigger subject than this. Any questions or comments?
One more question about illusory body.
Yes.
Since it's going to be applicable to the conversation tomorrow about the Bardo,
Mm-hmm.
is another way to conceptualize the illusory body is a body that exists separately from the phenomenal body.
It's an expression. The illusory body is an expression. You know, it is a figment of our imagination. If I can say it, it's a figment of my imagination. I'm trying to convey it to everybody else.
So it's not truly experiential.
Oh, it is experiential.
I think it is. Yeah.
It's only experiential.
Okay.
It's not a body. I think the way I see it is more like awareness of your Buddha nature. That's kind of like how and Lance, just correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of like how I see it. It's not really a body, but it's your awareness of your Buddha qualities. Is that correct, Lance?
Well, that part of it, yes, because that becomes the manifestation of it in our human lives, yes. You know, but it's like you know, searching for a rainbow, and you, as soon as you get to where you can see the rainbow, it disappears. Because right. You know, you're no longer looking at it from the same point of view as you were looking at it when you can see that light being refracted in all those droplets of moisture in the atmosphere. So it disappears. It was illusory to begin with because it was just an appearance of being real, but it was a manifestation of light and droplets of water. The illusory body it's an analogy. You know, it's an analogy of that.
Well, then one more.
Yes.
I'll let it go. It just so I think of how enriching these conversations are, and how in our lives, no matter how evolved we are or not at any given time, what seems to be some of the most important ingredients in those lives, even the life that is just right here, right now, is other people. So when we begin to understand that that those are not actual forms, and that's part of our delusion as well, and we can deconstruct that, then is the likely assumption is that there are none of us that are really separate.
Of course not.
Right. So we are the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that should bring you to bliss.
I've always liked the idea. One happy family. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Questions, comment?
Thanks so much, Lance, for
You're
keeping it so real and raw. I really needed to hear some of that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. And I you know, you all are an inspiration to me, and so thank you. And you know, we're in this together, you know, and so we, you know, there's an exchange that's going on. You know, we may be miles and miles apart, but you know, just your images, but more than even if I just closed the computer and we were talking on the phone, it would be the same experience. You know, because we're that much in tune. Okay. Please, let's do our dedications, because it's very important to do that. That we are different people now than we were 2 hours ago. I don't think anybody can deny that. And whatever wisdom, whatever skillful means we have experienced, we're now dedicating to the enlightenment of all beings. So, page 18 in the prayer book. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dormalurgampopa, Pagmadrupa, and Lordri Kumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kaju Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state. And may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the 3 kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikampa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. May the body, speech, and mind of the Buddhas, enlightened ones, become inseparable with my body, speech, and mind. Thank you all very, very much.